Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me, and she might hate me saying this, the future of professional wrestling, Billie Starkz. And before we get too deep into this, I do want to remind everybody there are links up above for her pro wrestling tee shop, her big cartel shop, as well as buy me a coffee because you have to support your indie content creators. So, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, I'm very excited because obviously you're killing it on the indies. You were killing it the first time we spoke, and you've only gotten better, I think, in the last year. But I do think that's the best place to start because 2020 was a nightmare, and I think we spoke briefly after Bizarro Lucho, and that showed the Ghost in the Machine. And then 3 months of wrestling didn't happen. So what was that like in that entire environment? Because it's been a crazy year since then.
Yeah, it really has been. A lot has happened since then. It feels like a lifetime ago because the quarantine felt like it lasted forever. But I grew so much during it because of just having the time off. Um, but Bizarro Lucha was like my last show before the quarantine. I was one of the lucky people during the quarantine. I still got to get into a wrestling ring and like train. I know a lot of people didn't have that opportunity because their training schools were completely shut down and like they couldn't get access to a ring at all. But I was able to still go train and wrestle and improve. So when the world came back, I wasn't completely out of shape. And then I had my first match back with Cole Radrick. I think it was like his second or third, and it was just a great time. I really enjoyed it. And then we have slowly got the world back together. It was weird for a while where it was like everybody's still spread out. We don't know if we can cheer. Can we do this? And now it's starting like everybody's getting vaccinated and the world is like semi back to normal, semi not.
So to even go a little bit deeper into that, and I'm going to dive into some of the matches, is that obviously having those 3 months off. I mean, wrestling is very physical. It can wear and break your body down. And so, what was that like having the ability to somewhat rest and not maybe take as much abuse on your body during those 3 months? And then also, the mental side of it must have been insane as well because A, nobody knew what COVID was. It broke down. My last show that I went to was Butch vs. Gore in DC, and
Mm.
COVID just hit, and then everything shut down out of that. And I was just coming as a fan, and it was sort of a crazy scenario. And then I didn't leave my apartment for 3 months, which is crazy. And so, what was that like, not knowing what to expect with wrestling? Because it is a big thing, also that was sort of going on.
I kind of had like my moments of like really, really bad of just like I want wrestling back, and there was like nothing I could do. It was like I just want to be in front of fans again. I just want to do this, and then we were doing like the no fan shows. And I was like, I guess this works for a while because at least I'm wrestling again and getting matches. And like I got to be around some wrestlers, but I truly just want to be around people again. I was a very like I'm a very social person. I want to be around people. I get to talk to people. And it was like I felt very disconnected from everybody. But then there was like the pros to it where I was like, I get to stay home and play video games. I get to hang out with my animals. And like I was doing yoga in my room every day and just like being able to get like stretched out and like have my body relaxed where I'm not like, oh, my back's a little sore, but like, I gotta finish the school project.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. That's super interesting about you is that you weren't just dealing with not being able to wrestle, but also dealing with school at the same time, and that being readjusted at the same time, which is crazy because I know a lot of wrestlers, a bunch of them make their livelihood out of this, and then a few of them got part-time jobs, and then a few others figured out ways how to do things, and then other people, a very good professional wrestler, I think it's safe to say, I think he's a teacher and his entire profession got uprooted and he's doing okay and he went to virtual learning, but that's a whole learning curve in of itself to deal with. So what was that like for you as well? Because it's not just one aspect of your life got uprooted, a whole bunch of shit got uprooted, for lack of a better word.
hmm So I actually went fully virtual and was like online the entire year. And when wrestling did slowly start coming back, I actually found virtual learning to be very, very good for me. I'm one of those people, like, as soon as my work gets assigned, I like to knock it down out as soon as possible. So, like, during the week, like, my teachers would assign, like, assignments on Friday and make them due on, like, Monday. But during the weekend, I'm off in wrestling. But because of the virtual schedule, they would sign out on, like, Monday so I can knock out all my work before the weekend, and it really helped me be able to have more control over my workload and my schedule. So that helped me a lot with just staying organized and not as stressed when I did start traveling. Like, I joked that during Mania weekend, before my first match, I was on like a Zoom call with my teachers and stuff.
Oh, continue, continue. I'm joking. I'm joking completely.
Good. But like
We're gonna
that's
get to that.
when,
Don't worry. I promise.
but that was like one of the things where like Roxy was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, have my earbud in, trying to listen to my theater teacher. I'm like, "I'll be back in a minute." Goes back to like wrestling, and we'll come back afterwards.
And so, obviously, and even going further into that, because now wrestling's coming back. Your first match, I think, was with Cole Radrick, or one of the first.
Hmm.
And obviously, Cole is killing it. That guy's everywhere, and he slays dragons all over. And you're killing it too, which is a dream match in a lot of ways. But what was that like, even getting prepped up for that on a physical level, a mental level, and even a safety level? Because at this point, you know, getting vaccinated and also having to trust wrestlers and the environment and not having fans around and making sure that you're in a safe environment, because really I think this sort of started coming back. I think I want to say maybe May or June, I want to say, I think.
Hmm.
And so what was that like going into that match and getting to that point, because it is a very weird scenario the first 3 months after COVID hit in March.
I think I was just ready, so like I was fully prepared. Like I was like in my mind mentally, I was like so ready for wrestling to be back. Uh Physically, I was taking care of myself during the quarantine. So I think I was like ready for that. Most wrestlers talked about like once they got back in the ring, they were like, I feel out of ring shape, which is different than being in shape in general. I feel like our wrestling cardio is completely different than any other cardio. Like you can have good cardio outside of wrestling, and then you get in ring, and it's like completely different. It's a little helpful because I'd started doing boxing, and boxing's helped with my ring cardio a lot. Um, just being able to move a lot smoother and like keeping my breath really steady.
And then obviously that Cole Roderick match happened, and what was that like? Because I don't know if this was taped or if it was streamed. I definitely forget
I
because
think it was taped. It wasn't streamed. I know that. But I love wrestling Cole. I've wrestled him a total of 4 times now. Um, yeah, I think 4 or 5 times. Because I joke that like he's on a losing streak with me. I think he only has like one win over me.
and so what was that like though? Because this obviously was no fans around and getting even used to no fans, because fans are a gaugement of what's going on, and we've seen this in wrestling. And I mean, seeing it in WWE is a great example. And the one I use is there's two examples. There's obviously Daniel Bryan and the Yes Movement, but even predating that, it's John Cena and Triple H at WrestleMania 22. And it's this situation where fans wanted to, root for the bad guy and wanted him to be the face in a match, and also wanted to elevate a particular wrestler. And they're the gauge for, what you're doing and what's happening and all that stuff. So what was that like, getting accustomed to that? Because that's what most of 2020 looked like moving forward.
So I believe one of my like first ever no fan shows, or like closed tapings was at PPW, and I remember it just being like, this feels like I'm in training right now. This feels like a practice, like like, oh, let's like work on some stuff, throw some matches together, and it just didn't feel like a show almost. Like it was like missing that vibe. I feel like fans set for wrestling shows. Like I feel like wrestling shows get their vibes from their fans and like their venues, and there's just key details that get set. And I felt like during those no fan shows, it was put a lot on the wrestlers to adapt and like grow a lot. I think I grew a lot just learning how to work cameras more, and developing myself as a wrestler to be able to perform for an audience at home and not for a live venue.
Yeah, and I think that that is super important. And then obviously Twitter almost also becomes the audience in a lot of ways after the match, and there's a lot of that feedback where because people are always engaging on Twitter, especially during streams, but that sort of I feel became during the COVID era the feedback loop in a lot of ways, and even on just what I was tweeting out at people. And when people were commenting on my tweets and then a bunch of discussions about wrestling and a bunch of other stuff, it became a very, very cool community during COVID, more so than Facebook groups because everybody was interacting. There are Twitter feeds and trends that I have had that have gotten like 90, 100 responses, and we're all having a great time watching like a BLP show and or
Mhm.
watching some other stuff. And obviously, I mean, you turned 2020 in a lot of ways into your year, I think, especially in August. And so let's talk about OVW because I think that was your first run in OVW, and you were facing a lot of people. And obviously, you had some stuff with Haley J, who's coming up now and killing it. Obviously, you were, I think, in a few scramble matches that featured Alice Crowley, Becky Idol, as well as Kayla Cassidy, and a few other people. So, what was it like coming into OVW? Because
Um,
OVW is a
I
crazy
feel I feel like it was like a new experience. Like I feel like it was good for the time I was allowed to be a part of it because it was running in Indiana for a bit, and I can't wrestle in Kentucky where they usually run shows
It's okay.
because of
Kentucky's not a
licenses.
great state. They're not good to their wrestlers. But anyhow, that's not the point here. That's not the point.
But I enjoyed my time with OVW for what it was and like the short time I had with them. I think what they're doing right now with Haley and a few other girls is great and giving them some exposure. And then also like TV work and just getting a new like idea of wrestling. Like I think this is like a different, almost like a different way of wrestling, a different style, like TV wrestling versus like independent wrestling.
Yeah, and I think that that also OVW carries a lot of weight in the wrestling world. I mean, it used to be a training ground for WWE, then it became a training ground for Impact Wrestling for a while. Then they're now independent, and they're also very much a feeder, and they're almost one of those things where it's almost like a resume builder in a lot of ways. That people who wrestle for them tend to go on to do bigger things and have gone on to do bigger things, whether you have one match or you spend, years there, wrestling for them. And so obviously, what is that like for you to, be a part of that and get the opportunity to be in what is known as a legendary promotion and something like that. And just from a wrestling fan perspective, because obviously you're a wrestling fan, you're also a wrestler, and it's obviously something very cool. It's almost like a bucket list item.
I think it's kind of funny because like when a lot of people are getting told like, "Oh, I'm a wrestler," in my state, they'll be like, "Oh, do you work for OVW?" Because that's like one of like that's the name promotion. Like that's what clicks in their head when you say you're a wrestler. They're like, "Oh, OVW." And it was like just a funny thing to say, like, "Yeah, I've worked for them, but there's stuff outside of that too."
And so I just like the fact that you got to work for them because they carry a lot of weight in the industry. And it is super cool to that degree. And it is one of those companies that's awesome. And then obviously, I think that wasn't what made your August. I think what made your August is a one match, and then there's only one match that made your August, and that was that Black Label Pro, and that's you against Jake something. And this is
Me
insane.
and Kyle.
So let me set the stage here because here we have Jake something who looks like a mad, crazy beast of a man who eats like children, okay? And then I say this out of respect. If he showed up to my house, I'd run the other way. My point is that he's now the champ. I think he's like the new champ. I think this is like sort of his first title defense, I think. And we have you, and you're sort of tiny, you're looking adorable, and then we got this match, and it looks like he's going to murder you, and then you push him almost all the way to the limit. And it's just like you were doing sunset flips, you were doing roll-ups against him and having some offense, and then like it looked like in the first like 2 minutes you were getting decimated, and then like there was all this comeback, and it was this insane match that was like perfect storytelling. So what was this match like? Because this match is like, oh my God, this is going to be a murder. And then it's like, wow, this is like a massively competitive match. And I think this was when future Billie Starkz superstar was born. I think this is the match that's the turning point.
I thought it was really, really like interesting because in my head I was like, "Oh, I'm in for a squash today," and it was just a very like unexpected thing. And this was also one of the matches where there's very limited people in the crowd. So it was like another one of those incidents where you were like learning to go with the flow almost. And this was one of the matches I've been wanting for a minute. So I was like, oh, I get to have one of like the matches that I've been wanting. I wish it was in front of people, but I'll make it work. And then I was just having a great time. I think I ended up putting him through a door, which was like one of my first experiences doing that. So I was like, this is kind of cool. And I scared my mom because she was like, I swear to God, she gets put through this door.
And what was nice about this is that I know this was streamed, and so I watched it streamed, which was cool. I also like the fact that there were some limited people there, but also Jake Something is an impact. He's the heavyweight champion for BLP at this point. This is his first title defense, and there's all this stuff going on, and it's a really big moment because a lot more people are watching it, and I have a feeling everybody thought, as you just sort of said, it's a squash match, and it was anything but that. And it's a very cool situation when wrestling surprises me. I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be cool and all, but, and I was like, wow, this is something that I wasn't expecting, and I think it's a real moment in a lot of things that wrestling can be beyond interesting, and I think you really put on a really good match to that one.
Thank you. I think that's like what I feel like wrestling is missing a lot is like that element of surprise. Like they almost give people what they expect, and I almost like that element of surprise. Like I talk about how I jokingly like I enjoy watching backyard wrestling more than like regular wrestling nowadays. Because it's just so crazy and like does nothing I expected to do. Like I'm like, oh, they'll do this next. Oh God, that's not what I expected.
Yeah, and I think that's something that wrestling is lacking is almost a big fight feel too, in a lot of ways. Where I don't find when I'm watching a lot of wrestling as of lately that there's a big fight feel that I know what's going to happen. I want something surprising to happen. I want some chaos. I think the term is controlled chaos, and I feel like with this match, and this is a really good example of it, is that this was surprising. This was something that I wasn't expecting. This was something that I was like, this was not foreseen for me. And I'm like, wow, this is what storytelling is. Like I felt there was a real story and a big fight feel to it, and that there was actually something meaningful being put forth, something to establish Jake Something as the champion, and almost like a David facing a Goliath and bringing the Goliath to its limit. And I felt like the victory for you in a lot of ways, even though he won the match, was that hey, you now pushed a champion in an unlikely situation, and it's an amazing match to watch. So I love this match in so many ways, and then obviously you also got to face Cora Jade, who's Atlanta Black as well, and BLP, and she is phenomenal. I put out a tweet earlier this year, and I said, hey, the 3 stars are going to be signed, sooner is obviously, and it was Blake Christian, Atlanta Black, and Jordan Oliver. And so obviously 2 of them got signed like 4 days later. So what was it like facing her? 'Cause I think you faced her a few times as well.
Actually, I only got to wrestle her that one time.
That's
Um,
crazy. That's crazy.
and like I was like one of those moments where it was like I'm wrestling one of my friends because I like started having more conversations with her and like becoming really close. And then it was very weird when she did like get signed because it was kind of like out of nowhere. Because I was like, oh, it's happening. I'm so happy for you, but like I had no idea it was really happening. Like when she like said something, I thought it might have been AEW because she did like Feud the Darks. So I was like, oh, whatever happens, like that's really good for her. I'm proud of her because I'm like, go live your dream, make your money. And I hope to like follow her someday too, and like get to the same level she's at because she's getting amazing training right now. I actually got to run into her at Mania weekend, and she's in great shape. And I was like, "You look great, and you're doing what you need to."
Let's talk about that because this is super interesting. Where WWE, AEW, Impact, Ring of Honor, they're really pulling a lot of people out of the indies, and we've seen this now for the last 3 years. And so, what is that like? Because what's going on, at least the way I see it as a wrestling fan, and you might see it differently, is that I see that the indies are becoming the feeders for tomorrow's superstars, and places like Beyond, and places like Limitless, and BLP, and we're going to talk about St. Louis Anarchy in a second, are becoming very much where these companies are looking out from and pulling from and signing people from. And it's very cool where I don't think that existed 4 or 5 years ago. And I mean, I just named a few companies. Obviously, New South Action Wrestling is another, two, and there's some out on the West Coast. But what is that like, knowing that these companies are now looking at wrestlers, and now they're actively, whether they openly say it or not, it's crystal clear, and it must be very cool because probably a lot more people than I know who are signed or had contracts and things of that nature. And so, what is that like for you, knowing that hey, people have eyes on what you're doing in the ring?
I always believed like people were like looking out and like looking for the next people. And I think it just became more apparent when like my friends were getting picked up and like I was like, oh, I know this person. Oh, I know this person. This is kind of weird. And then I can like also talk to those people about advice and like, hey, what about this and this and this? And they have like the right mindset because they have made it to that level where I can pull advice and like improve myself to get to that. And I always felt like it was very interesting to know that there's eyes, but at the same time, you never know when they're watching. So you always have to put on that good performance no matter where you're at. Because like the independents are getting streamed, they're getting so much more attention. So you truly don't know who's going to be paying attention.
Yeah, and I think the indie scene is exploding right now, and I think it's where everything's at. I come from the comic book world, and that scene is exploding just the same way in a lot of ways. Wrestling is exploding, and it's very, very, very cool what's going on with that. And I do want to talk about something negative slightly, and it's probably one of the biggest victims of COVID in the wrestling world, and it's St. Louis Anarchy, where they got sort of decimated. And I spoke to Matt Jackson, obviously. I spoke to Gary J in the last 2 years about 4 times. And I know how much you love Gary. So the idea is that, though, is that they were supposed to run a bunch of shows. A bunch of shows got canceled. Then they're in St. Louis, obviously. And then what wound up happening is that the levels kept getting changed in St. Louis on the COVID threat. And then there was the entire Spirit of Spalding thing that happened. I think you were in Block A against Mikey. And then Block B got canceled and it got rescheduled. And then something else happened. And then Block B happened. But then Block A got canceled. And so what was that entire situation like? Because that's a crazy wrestling situation that occurred. And you're sort of booked, you're not booked, gets rerouted. And there's some other stuff going on with you and a few other people. And so what was that like, really adapting to that circumstance? Because I have a feeling they weren't the only promotion that had to do a lot of maneuvering.
I think that came a lot with the COVID era and just like people having to like change what was going to happen in their shows and stuff. And like St. Louis Anarchy had to do with what they had, and a lot of times they had to cancel because due to the restrictions, they couldn't run a show, they couldn't sell tickets. They're like, with your restrictions, we can literally only have the people in the locker room, and maybe that goes over by a little bit, and it was just better for everybody's safety at the time, just to like cancel the show and maybe reschedule. And it was like a little frustrating at times when like the shows would get canceled because I'm super excited about like the people I was about to wrestle in Block A, for Spirit of Spalding, and St. Louis Anarchy is like one of my homes, so I was like, yay, I get to go to St. Louis, I get to go hang out with this person and this person, and just I love the vibe they got there. And it was just weird during COVID that like we couldn't really experience it and have that one of the promotions like steadily running because of the COVID regulations.
Yeah, and then obviously, I mean, I would imagine it must have been beyond frustrating for everybody involved because you had a bunch of amazing people doing some great stuff there, and there's supposed to be some amazing matches that were going to happen and that are not going to happen, and that may happen now too, with what recently just happened in WWE. And there's a certain wrestler, what is it, 71 days? He's going to be free, and that's all I'm going to say. There's two of them in 71 days that are going to be free. So I'm going to leave it at that on that point because I don't want to get in trouble, you or me for that matter, on who I'm speaking about. But he's been all over the place is a good way to go with that one. And then obviously I kind of want to also jump into, another match that sort of happened a little bit later after this. And that was your first match, I think, against Solo Darling. And that
Yes.
was New Wave of all places. And New Wave is one of the promotions that's been almost running consistently all throughout COVID for a while. And so that's a crazy company. And obviously, I just had somebody on from them. And what was that match like? Solo is one of the best wrestlers in the world.
I really enjoyed wrestling Solo, and it was just great to be in her company. Uh, that was the first time I got to wrestle her, and then later in the year for Fight Forever for GCW, I got to wrestle her. And it was very, very fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. We joked because in the first match at New Wave, she accidentally like popped her hip, uh, and it was like, oh God, I broke her, I broke her, I broke her, because we were trying to like get her on an airport, and she could not walk. Like we had to carry her, and like, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to break you. And then we wrestled again, and she was like, you should give me that same move that like popped my hip out of place.
So obviously you wrestle her in New Wave, and then you wrestle her at Fight Forever in 2021 in January. And so, what was that entire vibe like? 'Cause that's a crazy show as well, where it was 24 hours of wrestling, and what was that at like 4:15 in the morning?
Yeah. So it was very, very like interesting because Solo like lives nearby. So she was like, oh, I won't be there until a little later since the show is so late. I promise I will be there. And I was like, oh, cool. I just know I got here early because I was going to enjoy some wrestling. And then I remember just being exhausted because it just got so cold. And I was like, oh, I'll just go in the car and like warm up. And I set an alarm on my phone for like 2:30 or something. And I like fall asleep. Nobody's woke me up. And my alarm doesn't go off. So I'm just like, I wake up and like oh crap, did I miss my match? And I like check my alarm and I'm like, oh, it's only like by like 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to go in and get dressed.
So my story of Fight Forever, and I told a few people this, is that I stayed up and I watched about 17 hours of it in a row. Now, I was also slightly drinking, and I was having a great time tweeting, and I was waiting for your match, and then I was going to go to bed. So here's what happens: is that I'm watching, and I'm like, wow, when's this match going to come about? Because I had a feeling that I sort of saw it somewhere that I was going to be on this block, and then I go to sleep, and then now I'm waiting for basically Camp Leapfrog to come on, and apparently I sort of was setting my alarm, and my alarm goes off, and apparently on an iPhone, if you hold down your power button, if it doesn't in the power thing, you can hit the SOS, and I accidentally called the police on myself during waking up. So now the police say, it's Friday. I'm like, no, it's Saturday. And like, meanwhile, I'm right. They think I'm crazy. And then meanwhile, I'm like, did I just call the police on myself, Mom? Oh, well, I go back to bed for another like hour and a half. Then I come out and I'm all happy. And then I pour myself some cereal, take out my this is the worst. I then bring my laptop, eating my like cereal, and then the police quietly knock on my door in my parents' house. I'm like, oops. So that's my entire Fight Forever story. And it's the greatest non-wrestler Fight Forever story ever. And if there's ever a title built, I will happily defend that. So that's my experience with Fight Forever. And then after the Tony Depp and Jordan Oliver match, I was done.
It was a great match, Dario. I actually, right after my match, had to head to the airport because I flew for the first time from there to Texas. And I was watching that match at like the hotel room before I went and wrestled. I was like, this is so weird. I got like on a plane, fell asleep, slept for a few more hours, woke up, and the wrestling show that I was on is still on.
It was a very, very, very odd experience, and my experience with it was phenomenal. And I got through it with a bunch of Dr. Pepper and some monsters, and I did
I
it in
thought
my
it was
house.
hilarious. Everybody talking about the commercials they would have in between and like driving them insane.
Oh, it was crazy, and it was. But after 17 hours and my police incident, I think it was time to call it quits. And I
Yeah,
realized
it's a
I'm never
break.
going to do it again. I understand that apparently I learned something about my iPhone, so I have GCW to thank for that. So that's my experience. But I thought it was a crazy concept, and I think it's actually a brilliant concept, and I think they should do it again. Honestly, I think it's great what they did without
Hmm.
fans. I think doing that once a year would be such a cool pay per view. I would pay like $50 for it, easy. Easy. I would like GCW. Just like I'd pay 100 for it. I honestly would because I think it's such a brilliant concept, and I think there's just so much possibility when you're bringing in so much talent in and out that like you could do some amazing stuff with it. But that's my experience, and I thought that it was really cool that you got to face her again as well because she's just a huge amount of information that's available out of her head, Solo's head.
Hmm.
And then speaking about really cool wrestlers, obviously you also got to face Diana Peranzo. I think I said that right, right?
Yeah, sounded right.
I'm really bad at names, everybody. So what was that like? Because I don't know if she was the Impact champion, women's champion at that point, but obviously WWE had no idea how to use her. Comes to Impact, is tearing it up in Impact, or was just about to go to Impact, and obviously she was killing it on the Indies. And so, what was that like facing another star and who was killing it and is at that level? Because the way you get better, at least in my view, is iron sharpens iron.
Hmm.
So what was that like?
I thought it was very like fun because it was just another opportunity for me to grow. Like you said, just getting those greater opportunities helps you grow from one level to another because you are wrestling greater talent. And I was just happy to be in a ring with her. And yeah.
And I think it's just cool how BLP brings people in, and Killer Kelly is also similar in that regard, where that's another woman you have to face in BLP, and it is awesome when you get to face people like that, and they bring in good talent and things like that. So that's cool in that regard. And then obviously I do want to talk about Girl Fight because you're not new to Girl Fight, and you've been killing it in Girl Fight. You did killed it in 2020, and you had some matches. Obviously, I think Ari Alexander was in there, Blair Onyx was in there, Charlie Cruel was in there. I know you know Charlie very well. Hannah Henderson was in there. Holly Cromwell was in there, and she may or may not be a Bulbasaur fan. Heather Reckless was in there, and Valentina Loca. Can't speak today. Was in there. I think Mickey Knuckles was in that match. I think also.
Hmm.
So what
I
was
actually
that
got
like?
to. It was very fun. I enjoy like wrestling. Those are all great women, like you just stated. And I think it's great to have like these all female promotions just to star like women wrestling and women wrestlers. And Girl Fight does that really well. I'm happy for just having a place like that. And I'm currently the champion of Girl Fight.
Let's talk about
Wanting.
that match. Let's talk about that
Ooh.
match because Mickey Knuckles is scary as fuck. It's a good way to put it. Okay, I don't know. I don't know if you watched No Peace on Sunday.
Hmm.
Her versus Eric Ryan was a crazy match, and they were both bloodied up. And Mickey Knuckles has pushed forth women's wrestling in a lot of ways. Has pushed forth women's hardcore deathmatch wrestling in a lot of ways. And Mickey Knuckles is a fucking monster. And so what was that like? Because obviously Mickey Knuckles is a veteran. She's been doing this for forever. She's been all over. She's gone all the way up. I mean, me and her have spoken about this on this show, and from very humble beginnings to being one of the top hardcore female wrestlers ever, if not the hardcore female wrestler of all time. So what was that like? A, facing her and then beating her for the championship, because it's almost like handing the guard over in a lot of ways.
I thought it was like very like one of those moments that I won't forget because Girl Fight is like one of the homes. And I was like, this is really weird that like I actually have this title because I remember like growing up and watching Girl Fight as like a fan in the crowd. And it's like, this is weird. I'm kind of in the ring now holding like a championship that I saw a bunch of other girls do that like I looked up to, like Aja, who is a ref for WWE now. And there's a few other girls. And then I remember like Sue Young, and that Sue, I actually got to wrestle Sue for Girl Fight, and I really hope to wrestle her again. And it's just really, really weird that, and then I ended up beating Mickey Knuckles for the title. And it's like, oh, how things happen.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think is very cool, and it's also the idea that you win the title off of somebody. Because the way I view things, and maybe it's just the fan in me, is that what makes titles is that titles in a lot of ways carry prestige and carry clout to them, but it's also who you beat for that title. Where if you beat somebody else versus Mickey Knuckles, that the Mickey Knuckles thing carries a lot of weight because you bested one of the greatest women's wrestlers out there. And that helps tremendously, and it almost gives you that boost in a lot of ways. And so what is that like going into a few of your title defenses, because you've gone through some of them now, and I think you went through a whole tournament defending your title, and now you have that boost to you, and it's really, really cool because now it's like, oh, this is the champion that beat Mickey Knuckles for the belt. And now she's defending it, and that's how I view it. And maybe I'm reading too much into it. Very well could be, but it's that idea, and I think it carries a lot to it.
Hmm. I think it's like looking at it as like I beat one of the toughest women in wrestling right now, so who's going to step up and like be able to take this title from me?
It's what they're doing with Roman Reigns. Exactly what they're doing. They just stole it right from you. That's what we're going with. That's what we're going with. We're gonna
Yeah.
run with it until we can't run with it anymore, and then we're gonna pivot. We're gonna pivot, and then we're gonna turn you into John Cena, and it'll all be good. It'll all work
It'll
out.
be perfect.
You got this
I
whole
got my
thing
five
figured out.
moves of doom, John Cena. You can't see me, and like just hit the DVD, the bump up on.
We got it all figured out beautifully, and I'm sure it's all going to work out. So, and that's how I view everything in my life. So clearly that's where we're going. And then obviously, speaking about some women as well, and obviously we're doing all this out of order. I do want to talk about Sky Blue because the two of you have been going at this for a while now, and it's not dead, is it? That rivalry.
We keep running into each other. It happens as it happens. I think Sky is an amazing performer, and I love being in the ring with her because I feel like we test each other's limits every time we get in the ring. And it's just a fun battle at the end of the day, a fun wrestling match.
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting what the two of you have done, and it's far from over. Is the greatest way how to put that, and everything that's going on with that. So obviously we've been doing this slightly out of order, and I do want to talk about Mania Week. And Mania Week is sort of crazy because in 2020 Mania Week didn't happen, and obviously 2021 it did. And so, what was this like for you? Because obviously, you know, COVID is still a thing, but it's also not a thing at the same time. It was limited tickets in Florida. It was obviously a little bit warmer out there. There was a lot more safety precautions, and you had a lot of stuff going on. You had some stuff going on with GCW and Jimmy Lloyd's D-Generation F, where I think Roxy C and obviously Sky Blue was involved in that. And so, what was that like? And I think you had some other stuff going on as well, where you had Our Spring Break with Starboy Charlie as well. Alley Cat's Real Hot Girl Shit you were involved in with GCW. I don't know if Unsanctioned Pro 11 was GCW or if that was just another show separate. And so, what was that like? Really getting to wrestle for GCW during Mania week?
I just had a great experience like the entire Mania week because I was wrestling a bunch of people like you just named off that are people who were like on my hit list of like these are matches that I want to have. And like Allie was one of the matches I've been like asking for the longest time, and like it was about to happen and the stuff would happen, and it was like, okay, it's finally happening and it's on this huge stage. And I felt like it happened how it should have. And then I was like one of the people who like during Mania weekend I actually got like spaced out my bookings where I had like two matches each day. So I had total like six matches and they were spread out and I wasn't like exhausted because I knew that like the Florida heat's gonna kill me for one because I was like when I first went down there and had my triple threat, I just remember like breathing and just being like, it's humid. I hope I don't pass out. And like the rest of the day just like chugging water bottles getting prepared for my next ones. And then I remember like people having to go from like show to show to show. And I feel like my like first Mania weekend was really enjoyable because I had like a really good schedule where I had these bookings but then could still enjoy the rest of the shows and like enjoy my business trip, as my father would call it. Wrestling is business, so business trip to Florida and enjoy my Florida week too.
And then the other two matches I think were IWTV Family Reunion with Gary J.
Yeah,
And obviously there was that stuff, and me and Gary spoke about that and how you, I don't know, you challenged Gary and Gary declined and then he eventually accepted, and that was
I
sort of
keep
crazy.
liking the bear.
And obviously it's sort of coming out of St. Louis Anarchy. I think it's safe to say that match is coming out
Mhm.
of. And for those who don't know, Gary J is the mayor of St. Louis Anarchy in a lot of ways. I don't want to say he's the gatekeeper because I don't think gatekeeping is the right word, but he is sort of, you got to wrestle him to go through St. Louis Anarchy is a good way to put it. And so what was that like? Because obviously Gary J hits hard, he chops hard, he can go very hardcore. He's obviously fighting in ICW, no holds barred right now extensively, and he's done everything, and he's gone toe to toe with some of the most hard hitting individuals in the business, and he's been doing this forever. So that's almost a hit list bucket thing for you, I would imagine.
Yeah, I was really happy to wrestle Gary during Mania weekend. And it was also like that match representing Anarchy. So I was like very happy that that match got to be me and him out of everybody out of St. Louis Anarchy. We were the people representing it. And then also we just had a brawl. I don't think anybody was expecting the like fight that they got from us. Because I wasn't going down without a fight, and Gary did not want to take the L from me.
And it's a great match because again it's very similar to that David versus Goliath, young versus old has got that vibe to it as well, where it's almost like the veteran versus the new student, and the new student showing what they can do to their teacher in a lot of ways is that type of story, a lot of story being built into it. And I was joking with Gary when I interviewed Gary. I said, you just don't want to murder Billy. You just don't want to murder her. It's kind of like when Triple H says, Daniel, I don't want to fight you because I'm going to destroy you. I'm trying to save you. It was that type of moment, and it's a great match. And then obviously the speech afterwards was great too. And obviously that public praise is very cool because I think it speaks a lot of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so what was that like, getting a Gary J speech?
I was not expecting it. I will say that. And then I was just sitting there like, dang, this man really just beat me. And now he wants to talk. I want to go home. But then it was also like the moment when he said like all the good stuff about me. I was like, oh, Gary does like me.
And then obviously that was I think on the first day, and then I think the last day was Tony Deppin's Beer House, and you got to face Heather Monroe, and
Yeah.
that's a cool that was a very enjoyable show in a lot of ways. And I wish it didn't come under the circumstances it came under, but obviously it was a very good show, and Tony Depp knows how to put on a show, if
Mm-hmm.
anything. And Tony Devin deserves a lot of praise for that. But what was that like for you? Because getting to wrestle Heather is kind of cool, and being in just another match, and also you're on a show called Beer Hoss. So how bad a show can it be?
I thought it was funny, just like being a part of that show and it just being all the freaking Deppin, just Deppin in general. Uh, because it was just a fun time. But I remember like getting there and being like, okay, one more. uh, or that wasn't my last one. I think Unsanctioned was my last one.
It might have been,
It
yeah, it
was
might have been.
that, then it was so disorganized. I can't keep up with it now. I remember during the week it happened, but now it's like I can barely keep up with what I'm doing this week. But it was like one of those experiences where I still had so much fun, and Heather was one of the people I haven't got to wrestle before, so I thought it was fun to just like be able to collab with her and have that match for Mania Week, and it get streamed and have a really good show.
Yeah, and I like the fact that a lot of it was streamed, and you were also in a cool position where you got to wrestle for GCW and IWTV, and getting to wrestle for both audiences, and obviously there's crossover on both of them, and it's kind of nice when people who have both subscriptions and are paying for the collective or the collection, I forget what it's exactly called, get to see you across multiple platforms and can actually choose. I know people who are watching GCW on their iPad or a tablet, and we're also watching IWTV at the exact same time. And obviously, it's a very cool thing when people get to see wrestlers cross promote and wrestle all over wherever they want to see them. So I like that idea. So speaking about GCW, let's talk about JCW. I know very little about JCW, so educate me on what JCW is, because I don't feel like spending a lot of money on GCW right now. $15 every single weekend adds up so quickly. It's like
Well,
$60 a month. It's expensive.
they've been doing a lot of free stuff on YouTube though.
That is true. That is true. And some of their stuff does get out onto YouTube later on. But like when you're running a show every single weekend and it's like 15, $16, it adds up really quickly.
Which makes sense, yeah. So JCW is a feeder promotion for GCW, and I've been wrestling for them. I had a match versus Charles Mason, which is up on YouTube. Uh, and then there was another one where I wrestled Janai Kai, who I think is a really great up and coming female. A lot of people should be paying attention to her because I think she has a great future. And then recently I wrestled Young, Dumb, and Broke. And I teamed with Janai Kai and Jody Threat and had that match.
Yeah, and that match was fascinating. I love Young, Dumb, and Broke. I think it's great. I think that they're funny, and then I just love their name, and I don't think though they're the same without Jordan Oliver. I think Jordan Oliver is like their de facto leader indefinitely, and he's just phenomenal. But anyway, I enjoy from what I've seen of that, and obviously it is fun when you have all this stuff, and also I like the fact that GCW is sort of going through an expansion in a lot of ways, and it's nice that they're branching out, because it's kind of cool that they're giving a lot more talent opportunities, and that they're also sort of hitting a different demographic with this type of wrestling. First thing, they're more, GCW, $15 pay-per-views, because not everybody like me is going to go drop $15 every single week. But, again, I know very little about GCW. And I just know it's a big expansion, and it's kind of a cool thing when companies are expanding and they're doing cool things, and they're also giving a lot more opportunity. And also a lot of the people that I think are wrestling for GCW haven't wrestled yet for JCW, haven't wrestled for GCW yet, or haven't done it on a recurring basis every weekend. So it's a very cool thing in a lot of ways to make that happen. So I'm looking forward. I'm gonna go check it out. Is the point? And then the final thing I want to talk about, and again, going to ask a somewhat uneducated question, but in February, and I think it's the biggest thing, is that you were part of something called the Big Starkz brand, I think Invitational, or right, and that entire event. And so obviously you're Billie Starkz. It's connected to you. It's connected to Mouse. And so how did this idea even come about? Because and before, so how did that idea come about? Let's start there.
So the idea kind of came about because Mouse ran a show before called Fright Night. And then he was kind of in like the mood to run another show. He was like, "What about this? What about this?" And like finally was like, "Oh, what about the BSB Invitational?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay, give me this number amount of people who's like part of BSB, or like who you think should like probably join." And I was like, these are the people who I like and feel like would put on a great tournament. And then he was like, okay, okay, I'll start reaching out to people. And then I was like, oh crap, now we have to like make matches out of these people. So I'm like pairing people up. And I was like, what about this match and then this match? And then, how's this going to go?
So there's so much to talk about. So I'm going to ask a somewhat uneducated question, but I think it's a necessity at this point. What is BSB exactly? Because you guys sponsor so many wrestlers. Obviously, we have the knee pads, we got the flags, we got some merch. And so, what is that exactly, and what do you do for wrestlers precisely? Because I think it is important to actually know this, because I think that some people know it and some people actually don't. And I think that it's it sounds like an uneducated question
You're
on its
good.
surface, but I don't think it is.
So BSB is a brand me and my father started during like the quarantine because it happened out of a joke. I was going through a little bit of a depression, and Mouse, my stepfather, was like, "Okay, like I need to find a way to make her laugh." And like put a joke on Twitter. He was like the LeVar Ball of wrestling, and I was his Mello. And if anybody hurts Mello, you got to deal with him. And if you don't know what LeVar Ball is, he owns a brand called the Big Baller brand, and we kind of like turned that into our own thing and joked about it being the Big Starkz brand. So we kind of ran with that, and it's turned into this big thing. But like we're honestly just like a brand, and like everybody who's in it is mostly like family. So we help family when family needs help.
And then obviously, because what winds up happening is at all these shows, somebody will come out with the knee pad symbols, or will come out with a flag, and then it obviously almost it appears somewhat like a faction, but sort of in I don't want to say I don't know how to explain it the best way, but it almost comes like out as a faction where oh Alex Kane is sponsored by the Big Starkz brand, for instance, and he's wearing the knee pads. And then it's kind of like, oh, it's mentioned, and so all that happens. So it's very cool because it has become very much recognizable in wrestling, and it's
Mhm.
super, super interesting on how that all came about. And then obviously, you're now running a show, and just to give an idea of who was in here, obviously, I think you have, Levi Everett, you got Adam Slade, you got Braden Lee, Kevin Giza, Ace Perry, Cole Radrick, Trey Lamar, Aaron Williams was also involved on this show. And I think you got to wrestle Aaron Williams, who was one of the best unsigned talents on the Indies. And so, what was this like? Because obviously, you got to put your booking hat on, and you're reaching out to people, and obviously, you're connecting with people, and now you're entering the booking game a little bit.
I really didn't do anything. I just was like telling Mouse my ideas.
You're supposed to
Uh,
claim credit. The same people.
I don't want the credit. Because then they're gonna come to me like, "Hey, can you book me?" And I'm like, "No, go talk to Mouse."
The same
uh,
people, always. Whenever somebody says, "Hey, Andrew, you booked that cover," I didn't do it, but give me the credit. I'll take all the credit you want to give me. Just because I didn't do any work doesn't mean I won't take the credit. But anyway, continue.
but when we were like organizing it, literally my thing was like just saying people and like seeing if Mouse would go yay or nay. And then he's very like disorganized at times, so I was like, I'm going to put a match card up together. If you want to change anything around, let's change it after I put something together. And then we just started reaching out to people and like, hey, what about this date? Because we were gonna do a closed taping show and we are just trying to figure out when everybody was free, and we didn't want to like take away from other bookings they would probably already have.
Yeah, and then obviously this tournament went on, and this tournament was kind of crazy, and it was great, and I think it highlighted a lot of wrestlers. And then obviously I really enjoyed that Aaron Williams match, where that because I love Aaron Williams. I think Aaron Williams is much like Gary Jay is one of the best unsigned wrestlers and one of the best unkept secrets on the Indies. And I mean, his entire thing is that unsigned and don't care. So what was that like facing Aaron Williams, who has legitimately been on the Indies for almost 20 years, has gone up and down the road, has traveled with John Moxley, back in the day, and he, I've an episode on my podcast coming out with him, and it's this idea that he's telling stories about John Moxley using his speedway points to buy, food from show to show, which is crazy. I don't know if you, I don't, you're what in Indiana, I think.
Louisville.
Which is whoa, what state?
Kentucky, Kentucky.
So I'm making sure. I don't know my towns in Kentucky. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, good.
I know a lot of things in life. I do not know towns in Kentucky. I can tell you that for a fact. But it's this idea that in the Midwest, you guys have speed like waypoints and stuff like that, and so crazy. So what was that like for you? Because that's another big name in a lot of ways. And
I saw it as like me getting to wrestle like one of the people like when I was a big fan of wrestling, I watched Aaron and then it also turned into like where he's one of like our family members of like, oh, that's Uncle Aaron, I'll see him around. And then finally getting in the ring with him, it was a really great experience of just being like, oh, this is great. Because like I think a year or so before that, I took a Aaron Williams seminar and like he's teaching us stuff, and I was like, oh, I do see you do this in the ring.
and he is very very interesting in his character and the way he comes and the way he presents himself and just the amount of character he brings to the ring is a phenomenal position from a mental game. I mean, his mental wrestling game is unbelievable. Like I don't know, it's the ICW him versus Gary, and he's like doing what he does in the chains, and then also I love the fact that he looks like a horse jockey, and then he's just taking off his clothes when he's getting angry in the match. I just think it's the funniest thing. It's the funniest thing to me when he gets angry, and I'm like, oh my god, this is brilliant. The first time I saw that in BLP, I was like, this is brilliant in so many ways, and oh, it's great. And so, what was this entire experience like for you, though? Because obviously, you played a part in it. Obviously, it's sort of Mouse's project and your project, and it's a very cool thing to sort of be part of producing a wrestling show in a lot of ways.
I think it was very like interesting and good prep for me for like when I do run a show. Because I do plan on having like a birthday like birthday wrestling show sometime in December because I just want like wrestling is my life, so might as well celebrate my birthday with a wrestling show. So I thought it was good practice for that.
And then, oh man, that's going to be a blast. That's going to be something very, very special. I know Abby Jane is having a 21st birthday wrestling show coming out, I think, in August. And I think there's going to be a bunch of fans there, and that's going to be a fun show to watch in a lot of ways. And so, obviously, there's a lot of cool stuff going on in wrestling. And obviously, we just spoke about a bunch of stuff, and I don't want to keep you here all night. But I am curious, and I missed a bunch of stuff. I know you sort of have a bunch of titles that you've won. I know you had a bunch of title matches as well, and so I didn't even touch like 1/10 of this year, which is really bad
A
on my.
lot's happened.
A lot's happened. You've had a very very good 2020 in a shitty 2020, and you've had a pretty good 2021 so far, and a better 2021 than 2020. And
Let's
so
hope it keeps going up.
And so obviously I am curious though because a lot of stuff's happened. I know that St. Louis Circus Maximus just ended, which is an awesome thing that's back, and I'm very happy for St. Louis on that. But what is next for you in wrestling? Because a lot's going on, and I don't know where you're going exactly, and where do you even think the future of wrestling is going? Because obviously you've been doing this for a while now.
I'm going on about like 3 years now wrestling. And I feel like it's just like more time to grow. I'm really happy with the spot I am in right now, but I still know I'm not at the top, so I know I still have time to grow, and I don't think anybody stops growing, no matter like what level you're at. And I think I'm in a really good spot right now because of like my workout schedule and the classes I'm taking. And I'm like kind of excited, kind of not when comes back to like see how life gets organized again with like in-person school and then also traveling on the road for wrestling, and just enjoy life.
And so even going further into that, because I'm curious, your wrestling world in the next 2 years is going to expand dramatically from what I understand, right?
I think so. I really hope so.
Meaning that obviously, and I'm not trying to put you in a weird spot, but you're still in high school. I think is a safe assumption, right?
Yes, I'm still in high school.
And so the reason why I bring this up is because there's certain places you can't wrestle right now, but when you turn 18, that's all fair game. And so it's going to be a very cool experience when you get the ability to go and wrestle almost in Kentucky, and
Yeah.
they can't keep you chained up for lack of a better word.
Mhm.
And so obviously that's sort of what's going on. And this is the reason why I bring this up is because you are that good right now. And you're limited on where you can wrestle, which is crazy. And this is the whole point of where I'm going, why I say I think you're the future of wrestling, is because you're killing it right now and you are really pushing people who have been doing this for 20 years and 10 years and 5 years and started much later than you are, and you're bringing them to their maximum positions and you're beating them. And so, in a lot of ways, and I've said this before, if you're not watching Billie Starkz, you're sort of retarded because you are the future of wrestling. And if the future of wrestling looks anything like you, we're in good hands. And so that's just what I wanted to say. And then obviously, I mean, I think this year has sort of showed that, and the back half of 2020 has also showed that. And so obviously, saying all that, I do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. I know you got a bunch of stuff up there. I know you got the Her Story shirts are out there, and they're super limited, I think, as well.
Mhm.
And so,
So yeah, I am Billie Starkz. All my social media is at Billie Starkz, Billie, and then Starkz is Starkz. He said he has my pro wrestling tees and Big Cartel link. So if you want to go check out any of my merch, I do have a pre-sale open right now for her future shirts, which is a SCI like exclusive because I'm part of this really big tournament. And then I have upcoming shows if you want to check them out. They'll be
when is that tournament dropping?
ooh the August.
It's the end of August.
Yeah, in end or I thought it was like August.
It's in the middle of August.
Mm.
The video should be up the end of August. The actual tournament is the middle of August.
Yeah, the actual tournament's in the middle.
Like August 15th or something.
Yes. And then like it's like in the middle of the August, and then it will drop in
by August 30th.
Yes, like it will be
by August 30th.
August.
Look for updates.
We'll stick with August. All we have to do is aim in the vicinity.
Yeah,
We continue.
SCI Futures.
SCI Futures.
And so obviously that shirt is super limited. And the reason why I bring that up is that, once I think the tournament drops, that shirt is gone, if not sooner. And so it is urgent. And if you're interested in buying that shirt, you should obviously click that link and pick it up. Obviously the Pro Wrestling Tee stuff. And then you got a bunch of shows you're probably going to be on. And I don't know what you can and can't say, but a bunch of that stuff's going to be on GCW and IWTV for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
and
Go ahead.
yeah, the usual places you wrestle. You wrestle a lot in BLP. St. Louis is a home to you in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I think Action might or may not be in play. I don't know if you've been invited to be on yet, but hopefully soon because you belong there. And there's a variety of other promotions. Girl Fight, obviously, I think is a safe one to call it. And then there's a few others that you just play normally in. So obviously, buy Billie's merch. Basically,
Plain and simple.
pay for her college by buying her merch. And I'm sure either your mom or somebody or your dad appreciates me saying that, because if enough people buy your merch, your college will be paid for by that. So go buy her merch, everybody, and also making it crystal clear that you have to support indie wrestlers, and the way you support indie wrestlers is by buying their merch, going to shows, buying whatever they have. I already said that, but I'm gonna say it again. Follow them on social media. That means Twitter, Instagram, Facebook pages. Tweet at them when they're actually wrestling, especially if it's a no fan show, and even if it is a fan show, because it actually means something. And it is super important at this point. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Thank you guys so much for watching.
Well, that's a wrap on that one. So I thank you, Billy, for being on, and obviously we're going to do this a third time, and hopefully before you get signed to a major company, because I think it's coming.
Thank you so much.
And that's a wrap.